other adaptations, you'll need to be in that true state of pushing to maximum capacity. And that's when you get those adaptations of speed and power and being really quick. So like when we're getting older, it helps us, when you're turning like in your 60s and 70s, if you have that base of speed and power, you're going to be so much better off than someone who doesn't, because they like, if you fall or you need to catch yourself or anything. So that's obviously what you get in those higher zones. So you do get some stress and some recovery cost with the higher zones as well, but you get benefits out of it. So it's like, I'm always telling people, well, you want the benefit out of what you're doing. So tell me what you're doing and why you're doing it. I'll bring them back to that.
I'm Kitty Bloomfield, co-founder of New Strength and Saturée, creator of pro-metabolic food supplements and seriously saturated skincare. And today I have our friend Libby Wescombe back on the podcast for the 5th time. So welcome back, Libby.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We actually just recorded half an hour of a fucking podcast and I realized that I didn't hit record on the Zoom. So I'm so used to hitting record on all the bloody cameras. I'm so sorry, Libby. So this is round 2. Welcome back. Libby's done, I think we've done a group one together. We've done one with the Strong Sisters. She's done one with Craig. And then her and I have done one just on recovery, cardio, HRV. So go back and listen to those ones. I'll pop all Libby's details below anyway, so you can follow her on Instagram. But I wanted to get her back on today just to specifically talk about cardio, because I think a lot of women are really confused about cardio. A lot of women do too much. Women don't do enough. They don't really understand, the different zones and, what's beneficial, how much is beneficial. So I just thought, it's one of the things that Libby's super passionate about. And I've been incorporating a zone 2 cardio session in my training program for quite a while now. And it's been awesome. And Libby really got me into, breath work, which has been really good too. So I just do that before bed. And the zone 2 recovery sessions really helped with my soreness from training, because I really push myself hard and I'm often quite sore. And so it really helps me, so then I can just recover and push hard again. So welcome back, Libby. Sorry that you spoke for half an hour and it wasn't recorded.
It's all right. Practice run.
Okay. So can you please talk about first, what are the different zones of cardio and how do you measure it in terms of the heart rate?
Yeah, for sure. So there's technically 5 zones. And there's, zone 1, which is your walking, your general activity, general movement. Zone 2 is the zone that everyone's talking about these days because it's super popular now. And that's kind of where you're starting to exert yourself a little bit, but it's still very low recovery costs. So you're getting all the aerobic benefits and the benefits that you do get health-wise from cardio, but it's keeping the recovery really low. So it's kind of this bit of a magic zone where you can do it and you can still do your training, your weightlifting, have your day-to-day stress and not really add stress to your life. That's why I like it. And that's why I've been talking about it for so long. Then you get your zone 3, which is the best way for me to explain zone 3 is that you still do get the cardiovascular and aerobic benefits, but you get it with added stress. So you don't get any more necessarily cardiovascular benefits than you do with the zone 2. It's more or less the same amount of cardiovascular fitness and benefits, but you get some added stress to it as well. So that's kind of the best, easiest way for me to explain it to people who are like, why can't I do zone 3? It's not like you can't, it's just that you're going to have to, there's more of a recovery cost. And as we know, everything in life has a recovery cost, and recovery is not just a free process, So if you want to be smart with your training, I would kind of stick more to that zone 2, do some solid weight training, and then you can sort of experiment with those higher zones for that power and explosiveness and agility and all that as well.
And would you say, Libby, because I was going to say, when we did the initial podcast, prior to meeting Craig and actually learning how to strength train properly, I would just get up in the morning, drink the black coffee, then I'd hit the gym and I'd do an hour of probably zone 3 cardio.
Most women in your
would you say that
in your case are doing zone 3? So having come from a CrossFit coaching background, that's it was very obvious to me that women weren't generating much power to be in that zone 4 and 5, but they were kind of just hanging out in that zone 3 place because it's where the endorphins kind of come in. You feel good, you get the sweat on. And I'm not going to say it doesn't feel good. I admit that it does feel good. I'll still do, because I'm kind of more an advanced athlete now, so I'll still do some tempo runs, which puts me in that zone 3 sometimes to get me faster with my, whatever I'm working on. And it's nice. It's wow, I really worked hard. I feel so good. But that's kind of where the trap is, because if you stay there if you do it too much and you stay there, you're sacrificing a lot of things that recovery, you're sacrificing a little bit of what your body and your energy could put towards building muscle as well. So you don't want to hang out too much in that zone, although I don't want to like demonize it as the bad zone. Still, you can use it sometimes, but yeah, you don't want to be constantly there, which I do see a lot of women.
I think too, like a lot of women, I'm not saying this is everyone, but a lot of women that we work with, we get a lot of women who never really strength trained before, like me. They're doing a heap of like these HIIT classes and boot camps and running heaps. So they have this really low amount of muscle. And so, I think, and they think too that like doing these HIIT, they're like, I'm doing the pump classes, and they think that they're going to build muscle doing the pump classes.
Yeah.
Maybe just quickly touch on that. Why? That's
so a pump class itself is even different. It's not even like a zone because it's not cardio. It's more just what I call jump training. So, we've talked about this so many times on podcasts. You have to, you lift with like mechanical tension and progressive overload in order to build muscle. And if you're just doing like hundreds of weights, that's not really going to be happening. You're going to be tiring and having to put the weight down, but from muscular, endurance getting tired, or like your heart rate's getting tired. So therefore you put it not from the actual genuine mechanical tension. So yeah, and then on top of that, so they'll do that, and then they'll do their 5K runs where they're hanging in that zone 3. And so it's almost like you have it completely upside down. So I tend to tell women, let's honestly be really honest about where your main deficiencies are. Like I'll look at a photo of them. I'll put the photo up. I'll like, you're quite under muscled. So, we do want to I still believe that everyone should do some cardio because for health purposes, but I would be like, let's do the zone 2. Let's really focus on the zone 2 once or twice a week. And let's focus on building muscle. Because that's obviously more of a deficiency. But then I have also had women come in to work with me, or in my membership, there's a lot, because a lot of my members are really into strength training. Like they must just get it from me or something, I don't know. But they're like always just strength training. And then you can see sometimes there's issues with like injuries, or, they said they're starting to feel kind of slow in life or whatever. And, because strength training doesn't particularly make you fast or build that agility, which is all part of being healthy as well. So in their cases, I'd be like, maybe we should add in some HIIT sessions, do a little zone 2 as well. Let's make it a little more balanced. Because it's not going to really take away. If anything, it actually helps muscle building when you do it in the right balance. So I would say really be honest about what your deficiencies are. If you don't have any muscle and you struggle to build muscle, then what you're doing isn't working. So it's time to change, right?
Yeah. And I think too, like we talked about this before, is just starting and building the foundations. And, like, let's say you've never trained before and you're really shit at tracking your food and you just starting from scratch. It's like
start with walking,
get into the habits, build the muscle. Yeah. And then it's quite like, for me, for example, it was easy to go, I'm just going to add in this zone 2 cardio session because I'm already doing everything else.
Yeah.
And it's really helped me. So I really like that what you say about looking at where you're at now and what your goal is, where your deficiencies are, and then start there and then build on that. And then I think once you get into those habits, it's not that hard to add one more thing in.
Yeah. And it's also, like you said, just the habit of exercising itself means once you have that habit, you can take it anywhere. Do you know what I mean? But we've got to build that habit of consistently exercising first. So start with what's manageable, start with what fits into your lifestyle. And then, like we said, you can expand.
Yeah, because I think too, like, sometimes I think women can listen to my podcast about, oh my God, there's so many things that I have to do. It's too overwhelming. Like how do I eat the elephant? It's like, we'll just start with one bite, right? Like, so maybe eat your breakfast first and add the carrot salad in, and then hit your protein target and then start tracking your food, whatever, then add one training session in. And if you just gradually build up and then you get to a point where, okay, cool, I'm going to do some HIIT or like do the sprinting or whatever else. So don't think, oh my God, I have to do everything at once, because you don't. So, okay, cool. So those are the different zones. So like talk about the heart rate. Like how do you work out the heart rate?
So we're always going to start with your maximum heart rate, which the basic formula that everyone knows about is 220 minus your age. So that's kind of like where you would just start, right? Now it's not exactly accurate. So there's a few different formulas you can use. You can Google them. There's like a few different ones, kind of like the finding your maintenance calories or your BMR. There's different formulas. It's kind of similar to that. Everyone's slightly different as well. But 220 minus your age is a good starting point, except for women, especially if someone's active already. I usually say to add 5 heartbeats onto that, just because we also tend to have a slightly higher resting heart rate than men. So that's pretty much across the board. You're going to be a little bit different than a guy who does 220 minus his age. And then from there, your zones are basically a percentage based off that. So, your zone 1 would be just your walking, and that's between 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. Your zone 2 would be, I like to think of zone 2 more like 65 to 75% for most people. Zone 3 is that pushing towards 80, 85% of your maximum heart rate. And then zone 4 and 5, I don't stress too much about, exactly the difference between those, because once you're hitting that top end where you're going all out, you don't really have to worry too much about your heart rate, because you can only really maintain it for like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Zone 4, you would be able to maintain for maximum probably 2 minutes. It's very, very anaerobic. And then zone 5 is also still anaerobic, but it's also including that, phosphate ATP energy system, which is that power and all that as well. So it's kind of that crossover there. So if you're wanting to do like a real sprint, don't worry too much about your heart rate. Just try and go as hard as you possibly can, and then you'll be fine.
So like sprint 100 meters or something.
Yeah, 100 meters. Once you're doing like 200 meters, it's definitely a little bit more anaerobic. So you're going into that zone 4, a little bit of zone 3 probably. So it's that, for most women who are starting, I would start with 15, even 10 seconds to 20 seconds max, all out. So if you're using something like an Airdyne or an air bike where you can actually generate quite a lot of power, that's helpful, because some things you can't generate as much power as a woman. Yeah. So therefore you want to pick something like, if you're a pretty good runner and you have good biomechanics with running, you could do something like a sprint. If you are really shit with running and you have poor biomechanics, I would say probably don't, because you might injure yourself, or slowly work up to it. But something like a air bike, or even rowers can be good, but sometimes it takes a lot more upper body strength. So something like an air bike, and
so with the handles. With the
hand, that's probably my favorite. Even something like, so how gyms have like sleds where you push the sled, that can be really, really good, but just make sure that you don't use too much weight. It needs to be lightweight. So I say no more than 15% of your body weight on it. So
okay, we'll come back to talk about the HIIT, the sprints, but I just want to go back to the zone 2. So roughly what, I know you say don't get so fixated on the heart range, but roughly what ranges would that be for that heart rate?
For most people, I've seen it sit between 120 and 150. That's a big range, I know, but if someone is really unfit, they'll probably hit zone 2 in 120, 125. If someone's a little more active and, generally fitter, they can probably continue on the nasal breathing at, I like 140 is pretty good. Yeah. For most, like most of the women I coach, I wouldn't say necessarily like someone who's a complete beginner, they probably need to be lower.
And how do you measure it? What do you think is the best way to measure it?
So you can use obviously a strap like this one.
So she's holding up the Polar, if you're listening.
Polar H10 strap.
And then that just goes around under your boobs, right?
Yeah, so right underneath your, like if you're wearing a sports bra, it would be directly under the sports bra. And you could use an app called Polar 10, the Polar app, or you could use it with a watch. And the reason why this one's good is because it syncs with most watches and wearables. Or you could just do what I call the nasal test, where you need to be able to continue to breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. If you start breathing out through your mouth and you can still breathe in through your nose, that's where we're pushing that threshold, which is where it's not bad yet. It hasn't gone completely into anaerobic, because anaerobic is generally just like all mouth breathing, but it's getting close to there. So that's where you kind of sometimes want to pull yourself back if you're trying to stay in that zone 2. You should be able to nasal breathe completely, have a conversation with someone. And a really, really cool way of testing it is what I call the 12-word sentence. So you should be able to say it out loud. Pick any sentence that you can say, like count that it's 12 words, and you should be able to say it without taking a breath in between the words. So, sometimes even when you're walking and maybe you're doing like a live, an Instagram live, and you're walking, or stories, that's probably zone 2, because your heart rate's a bit higher than it would just be if you're normally walking, because you're having to talk as well. But you're probably able to say like a good 12 words, a good 15 words before needing to take a breath. But it's not just like what we are now, where we can just talk and talk and talk. Yeah. So it's a good gauge.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to try that next time. And so like duration and frequency, what's optimal?
Yeah.
How do you start?
So I would say starting with 20 minutes is a good starting point for even a beginner. If you're trying to do like a 10-minute zone 2 cardio session, it's almost not enough time for you to fully get into the zone 2 where we're getting those adaptations that zone 2 does, which is where we're actually like lengthening or increasing the size of the left ventricle of our heart. So it's increasing that so that we're able to pump more blood and more oxygen throughout our body. So you need to start obviously with minimum of 20 minutes to actually be getting those adaptations, because it's, it's the longer energy system. It's the energy source that we basically use day-to-day living. So it's supposed to be a bit longer. And then you want to kind of aim towards the top end of 60 minutes. I don't personally go past 60 minutes. And I did read some research that shows that once you get to that point where it's like, 90 minutes, where it's 1.5 hours, you actually start to have a little bit more what they call waste products, which then requires more for your body to recover from. A little bit more inflammation starts to set in. These things that come on when you're doing more of like that zone 3 stuff, even if you're still in the zone 2, there's like that limit for where, your body's, I guess you probably run out of some of the fuel sources. And so you start to take from other things. You might, if you don't have enough food in your body, you might start to pull from your muscles for fuel, and you don't want any of that to happen. So I would keep it in that.
So start with 20 minutes?
Yeah, if you're a complete beginner, just start with 20 minutes. Yeah, and then slowly build up. So I would progressive overload it, of course, and just do like an extra 5 minutes every couple of weeks until you get to like that 60-minute mark, and then you can kind of hold it there. Yep. You can also change things up. Once you get there, you can change things up a little bit and choose like a different machine or a different piece of equipment. Or
I really like just 45. I feel like 45 minutes is just for me personally, and just time frame as well. And you feel good. Yeah, it's really good. And then so you could then add a second session in after that.
Yeah. So rather than increasing the time on the one session, I would always say add a second session.
Yeah, and you're right. It doesn't, you don't feel taxed from it. It's quite nice, and like we were talking about before, you're sweating, which is one of the ways that you detoxify, which I feel like feels really good when you're
important. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk about the HIIT and true HIIT. Because I remember we talked last time and I was like, I was doing it's not real HIIT training, Kitty. You just sounds like sitting in that zone floor, So talk about what that looks like.
Yeah. So real true HIIT is not something that you can maintain past, 30 seconds. And if you do, it just means that you're basically sacrificing on power. So that's another reason why that zone 3 is kind of not something I would encourage often, is because you're not getting any of those power and agility and speed and those adaptations that you get from the higher zones. You're still getting the aerobic adaptations, but you're not getting those higher zone adaptations. So you're just getting a little bit more stress with the aerobic adaptations. But if you want those other adaptations, you'll need to be in that true state of pushing to maximum capacity. And that's when you get those adaptations of speed and power and being really quick. So like when we're getting older, it helps us, when you're turning like in your 60s and 70s, if you have that base of speed and power, you're going to be so much better off than someone who doesn't, because they're like, if you fall, you need to catch yourself or anything. So that's obviously what you get in those higher zones. So you do get some stress and some recovery cost with the higher zones as well, but you get benefits out of it. So it's like, I'm always telling people, well, you want the benefit out of what you're doing. So tell me what you're doing and why you're doing it. Like, I'll bring them back to that. If you can't tell me why you're doing something, then let's get rid of it. Like, if there's no reason, do you know what I mean? So benefits from that, benefits from zone 2. Zone 3, not always benefits unless you're needing it for like a race or you're an endurance athlete.
Which most of the women that listen to this podcast are not. Yeah, no. Pretty much. There. So, okay, talk about like what would a session look like then? How would you do it?
So for a HIIT session, it's short. That's the best part about it as well. That's why it's so much easier than the zone 2 is. You could do like 15 minutes and it's finished, because I would start with probably just 5 all-out sprints. 4 to 5, and then I would build from there and get to like 10. But you want to make sure, one thing that I have a bit of an issue with, which so if you know about Dr. Stacy Sim, she's really great in like promoting the power and the speed training for women, like perimenopause and menopause and that. But one thing she says, because she gets it from one particular study, is that she says that the intervals or the speed sprints should be like 10 seconds and then only 20 seconds recovery, or 20 seconds and only 10 seconds recovery. And I know where she's coming from because there's one particular study. But the thing is, I don't see that as as a good idea, because if you're not recovering properly between your intervals, you're not going to be able to generate the power and the speed anymore. So you're just going to get slower. So then it's, it kind of takes away from the whole idea of power training. And I do come from like a sprinting background, so I do know about it. Like I know that I have to recover fully or my time drops completely.
Would you
like
say maybe it's similar to like lifting, right? Like women not lifting.
Yeah, they don't rest enough. Yeah.
You can't perform, like get the best performance in the next set. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's, in order to perform, I like to say at least a 1-to-3 ratio of sprint to rest. So that could be, 1 minute. Let's say you're doing a whole minute of sprinting, which you probably shouldn't, then it would be 3 minutes of rest.
Yeah, okay. So if you're like just sprinting 100 meters and it takes you, I don't know, 20 seconds.
Yeah, let's say
rest for a minute.
The minimum, yeah.
Minimum. So would it really matter if you rested for 2 minutes and then went again?
I rest for sometimes 3 minutes between my top end sprints, but I do go fast. I'm generating a lot of speed. So if you're not quite fast yet and you're kind of like if it feels a little awkward and you're still not able to, that's completely normal because that's what it's like when you start. But still try to rest at least that whole minute, even up to a minute and a half.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. It wouldn't matter if you rested a bit more. It's not going to matter.
No, it's not about, so the point is about generating that speed quickly for that one interval. It's not about trying to keep your heart rate up for the whole session.
And would you say like, because I'm just thinking about some women that join our program, they're like very overweight, under muscle. Would you say, look, start with strength training, doing some walking, get into the good habit, build some strength, and then add this, like do the zone 2, because that's obviously, extra. You can imagine if you're like 90 kilos trying to sprint, and you don't.
I wouldn't sprint like running if they were like that, but I do think it's beneficial to do a little bit of the sprinting. Like if they could jump on a bike and go as hard as they can, because there's also some research that shows that, obviously you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose fat at all, but the high intensity sprinting actually helps burn the deep fat around your stomach, so that visceral fat. And when it's like a postmenopausal or a menopausal or even perimenopausal, they tend to sort of have a difference in where they store their fat, and they tend to store it a bit more around their belly. And there's quite a lot of research that actually shows it really helps. Obviously we can't spot reduce, but it does have there's some powerful mechanisms going on from the high intensity sprint training that actually helps that burn the fat around the belly. And they say that it's so obviously when we're younger, we have a lot more natural growth hormone circulating in our body after we train, and we lose that as we get older to the point where we basically don't have much at all. Natural growth hormone, like a teenager would have so much. And what the high intensity intervals do is it actually creates more of that hormone circulating around your body after you finish. So there's that benefit as well. So
could you then say, let's get on a stationary bike?
Yes. Yeah, just start. Or even like the cross trainer and just go all out. Like it's not gonna be like, you don't have to compare about like how fast you're going, because it's literally just how hard can you go at that given point in your life.
Yeah. And so you might do it for 20 seconds and then rest and do 5 minutes.
I think that's actually really healthy for even someone who's overweight. Yeah.
And this is the question I was thinking about. Can you do it, like, let's say you really like a time poor, like, could you do your strength training session and then do it at the end?
Yes. So that's kind of how I would recommend doing it. If you only can do, say, 3 days a week, you could do 1 extra day with a HIIT session, or you could just tag it onto the end of a current weight training session. It's always better not to do zone 2 or HIIT before you train, but it's definitely fine to do it right after you finish training and just do it as a finisher.
Yeah, cool. So if you can't like take the extra time and you add it in, do it at the end. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think what other questions that people would ask. Can you talk about the health benefits of the zone 2 and how it actually helps you recover from training? Like, why does it help you reduce the soreness?
Yeah. So it actually works through mainly like the blood flow that it generates. And it does help with recovery, but the reason why I actually say it can benefit muscle building and muscle hypertrophy, and that's through the increased blood flow. And some research actually shows this. So there was one particular study where they had a group of people cycle on one leg. So they just did one leg cycle, zone 2, while the other leg remained inactive, but they were doing resistance training as well for 10 weeks. And then the results showed that there was superior muscle growth in the cycled leg primarily due to an increase in capillary density. So capillaries are like small, tiny blood vessels that deliver oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and more to your muscles. And they actually appear to play a significant role in muscle growth and also recovery. So if you have increased capillary density, that correlates also with the activation and expansion of satellite cells in your muscles. And those are involved in muscle recovery and then also hypertrophy. So that's kind of the magic zone, because with just like movement and walking, you obviously do get some blood flow, but this particular benefit from cardio, which is where we're actually increasing the capillary density in the muscles, that's what really benefits. It does benefit hypertrophy as well. And I think for someone who's more advanced in lifting, it will benefit them even more. And there's a guy named Greg Nuckols, and he has a website called Stronger by Science, and he's an ex-power lifter. And he has a research review paper that I also like subscribe to. And he proposes that as your muscles grow, they actually might require a corresponding increase in capillary density for further growth. So to take it to that next level. And recovery, and also he talks about recovery. So recovery from weightlifting, it's actually very aerobically demanding, which people don't realize, because the weightlifting itself is more anaerobic. But even anaerobic activities, like take a 200-meter sprint, it's very heavy anaerobic, but it does heavily rely also on the aerobic system. So it's using a bit of both. So if you're enhancing capillary density through cardio, it can help optimize performance and recovery and strength training. And it can also promote greater muscle hypertrophy, so greater muscle growth, because it's optimizing that. So it's basically, if you think about muscle growth, it means how well can you recover? If you can recover really well, you'll grow more muscle, right? So it's also part of training and making sure you're training hard enough, but it's 50% is the recovery, right? Because if you can't recover properly, you're going to have problems, right? So that's where that cardio and that zone 2 comes in, from the recovery benefits and then for the actual muscle building benefits as well.
I feel like too, like, anyone who's advanced, like Craig and I talk about this all the time, like now when you're lifting like heavy weights, like we are, like you are too, like how much can you do that you can recover from to make progress? And I feel like the stronger that I am, like now, like this is even gets more important, because it's
becomes so much more important. That's where I think those 1 and 2% things come into play, things like your pre and post workout nutrition. And this is just another one of those things that really does help. Obviously, I would say I'm talking to someone who is athletic, who's actually eating enough food, not someone who has like exercise disorders. Do you know what I mean? So
totally.
Always there's people that will take and be like, oh, she said to do cardio to build muscle, but that's not what I'm saying at all. It's more for the person who really does want to, have that overall good recovery.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like we talk about this all the time. Like the basics, like nail all the basics. Like and then you can go, okay, what are these extra things that I can do that's going to take me the extra 5% or 10, whatever it is. But focus on the because we all do the foundation stuff. And I think just maybe touch on this as well. Like I know this podcast isn't about this, but I feel like when I talk to women, like a lot of where they go wrong is they're not tracking their food accurately. So like, if you're trying to build muscle, like if you're advanced like us, you've got to eat in a calorie surplus. So what's going to affect that is how much activity you're doing. So that's why we're tracking all of these data points, because, a lot of women that probably you work with, they're just under eating. Like you want to build muscle, you need
to make sure you're enough. That's like the number one. Yeah.
So this is why the food tracking is just so critical, I think, because if you're doing all this training, you're doing your zone 2, but if you're not fucking eating enough, you're not going to make any progress.
Make a difference. Yeah, it needs the raw fuel to actually build the muscle. It needs to get it from somewhere, so just make it.
And it's really like, I just think it's fascinating. Like in my, like you'd experiment on yourself. We talk about this too, like, and you've talked about this and Craig's talked about this, like having more muscle does increase your metabolic resting rate, but it's not as much as you think that it is. Like it's people go, oh, I have more muscle, I'm going to just be able to eat a fuck ton more food. But and look, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is just what I've noticed from my own self. It's like, it's that recovery process from the training. That's really, so when I've gone through periods where I've been a bit shit with my training and like, and then now I'm focused again in training. I'm like, fuck, I really can eat quite a lot of food. And when I push hard in the gym, I'm like, oh, the next time I'm so hungry. It's just something that I've noticed.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I talked about it, I think with Amy one time on her podcast about the 3 buckets, and we only ever think about the bucket of you know, oh, we need all this extra, we need enough food for like our internal processes, like our, you know, what happens.
Digestion and all that
Yeah,
shit.
your hair loss and your reproductive system and all that. And then people are like, but I need to eat enough for my training. But then they never think about that third bucket, which is the recovery bucket. So you can, you know, you can use too much energy for training that you don't have enough left for recovery if you're not eating enough. So it's super important to get all that right as well as the foundation.
Yeah, and you just don't know, and like everyone's so different, right? So
Yeah,
like
you
different
probably
people.
track it to know how much. Yeah. And there's signs if you're not getting enough food, you know, you start having like no energy, you get injured easily, you get sick. These things are really big. Like I find those things are more indicative of not having enough energy across the board for like your training, and you're kind of suffering and the recovery suffering. Whereas if it's other things like you're losing your period and that, then obviously there's a bigger issue there. But if it's these things like you keep getting sick, you know, you keep getting injured, you know, maybe it is your movement, but it's something to look at is, are you actually giving yourself enough food to recover from what you're doing in training?
Yeah, and I feel like too, and this is just, again, I don't know what the right word for this is, but just something I've noticed from clients. So the ones that really apply themselves and learn how to lift and push hard, you know, close to failure or to failure, like these are the new women, not they can eat more food and still recomp their body. So like compared to someone who, this is just an example, like there was two ladies in our program, they both started at like 94 kilos, similar height, doing similar amount of steps. One lady just for whatever reason couldn't do as much training, she had heaps of injuries and stuff, but she still lost weight because she was eating calorie deficit. But they both got down to the same weight, but they looked a lot different. So the one that had focused on the strength training, she looked more tone, more muscle, and her maintenance calories were much higher. Yeah. So it's like this amazing, and I think once you do it and you track everything and you're like, you'll just see.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of people that do talk about how, you know, having more muscle doesn't actually burn more calories, and it doesn't. So I think 1 pound of muscle only burns like 30 calories. I'm pretty sure I did post about this recently. But the whole thing that they failed to take into consideration is just that whole entire, you know, what they call G-flux. G-flux is basically your calories out overall become more. So even the simple act of having more muscle means you're burning more calories during your session, because the more muscle you have, the more calories you're burning. So when I'm lifting a weight, if I have more muscle, I'm squatting a weight, I'm burning more calories squatting that heavier weight than someone who has less muscle. So it's not just the particular muscle that you're burning throughout your day-to-day life, but it's everything that it influences by making you a better person, a more active person. You know, you're obviously going to be, when you're moving, you're probably going to be burning more calories. When you go for your walk, if you're a heavier person with more muscle, you're burning more calories. So it's not just the muscle itself, it's the, as I call it, it's the increase of G-flux. So that everything increases. So it's part of that, you know?
I think too, and again, this is just something I've noticed, but like obviously you and I are quite strong. Amy's quite strong. I'm just talking about people that we know in our like little sphere of, you know, what we do. But like when I'm, you know, focusing on my training, I've got more muscle. I can push heavier weights. And so like I find when I'm really focused on pushing and, you know, increasing my weights every week, or have, you know, I'm just increasing them, like that recovery, like the heavier weights you're pushing, more recovery. Like
and that's burning more calories if that's
exactly. And it's just amazing. Like I still amazes me today how much food I can eat. You know? Like it just is, and I think all women, they say, I just want to be able to eat more food. And, you know, you and I talked about this too. Like we're in the position now where if we don't track, we lose weight.
You lose weight.
It's just hard to keep up with.
It needs the food.
So it's like, if you can just put the work in and focus on like getting stronger and track your food for a while and be really diligent and consistent, once you get to that maintenance stage, maintenance is actually pretty easy.
And it's nice. It's quite relaxing, you know.
It is. I'll say to Craig today, I was like, it's already, you know, the food, like eating all the food. I'm like, oh fuck, you know, like it's just, you're right. It's either like dieting or even muscle.
They're both stressful.
But it's like, do the work, get there, be focused, and then you'll just have the rest of your life of, you know, and you can then decide, okay, do I want to be a bit more focused for a while, and you can dial it in, or then you can go, I'm just going to maintain for a while or whatever. And I think it just becomes, when you want to lose body fat, it's easy. It's very easy. I agree. Obviously, we're always trying to like get you guys to focus on the basic bit, but it's life-changing, I think. Like you would see it too in your program. The women, when they do it, they're like, they say to me, oh, I've got so much more freedom with food. Like it's the opposite. It's not, I feel restricted.
Yeah, it's all definitely the opposite. Someone just shared today, like she just booked a call in with me because she messaged me and I was like, just book a call in, and then she ended up working with us one-on-one. And she's just like, I'm just so surprised at how liberating it feels now that I'm tracking. And it's this thing where people just find it so daunting before they start, but it's the same with training. It's like this huge cloud is over your head and it's just so daunting, and the fear of like, it seems so intricate and complicated, but just take that first step, because you'll realize your life will change. It's actually going to make sense. It's like, it makes sense tracking, right? Training properly makes sense. It's not one of these random, weird fad things. So yeah, it's not that complicated.
And it's once you learn it, obviously at the start, it'll be more challenging, but it's like a skill, right? You just got to
The
practice.
learning curve, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, but I always say to him, like, okay, what's more stressful? Constantly every day waking up thinking, I don't know what to do. I have to jump on the next restrictive diet. I'm so exhausted and so tired. I hate my body. He says, I'm just going to put that energy into going, I'm going to learn how to track. And Anna Hands are one of our best transformations. She's like 5 weeks it took me. It was stress for 5 weeks and then it just clicked.
Good. Same with all
good.
Yeah. And I tell them now, like when I get on a call with someone, I'm like, so there is a learning curve. And I want you to know that it's not going to be easy at first, but I'm just telling you that it will get better. It will get easier. It's just this learning curve and you just have to embrace it.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
And I think too, I don't know if you probably agree with this, like, because I know you haven't been a retard like me and done all of the crazy dumb diets, but like all these diets work because they put you in a calorie deficit, like a big calorie, most of them big one. And I say to women, I'm like, once you do our program or say your program and you learn about energy balance and macros, and you'll be like, I can't believe that I wasted so many years of my life stressing about, diets and cutting carbs and fat. It's actually pretty simple. And it just gives you so much knowledge and power, and like it's actually quite easy.
Yeah. I tell them you'll never fail a diet again.
Yeah.
Because all these diets, the reason why they have such low self-confidence and low self-trust is because they've tried all these things and they've just failed because they're not sustainable. So when I tell them you're literally never going to fail a diet again, you're just going to have the knowledge for life, they're like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Anyway, we obviously can't harp on enough about this. And you can eat delicious food and carbs and, enjoy food. Like you post lots of amazing recipes and, every day I eat my food and think, oh, I love this. I love my ice. I love my potatoes. I love my whatever you love, You can eat food you love every single day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not about bloody misery. I'm just trying to think if there's any other questions. Oh, with the HIIT, how frequently should you do it? Like what's ideal?
I would just do it once a week. It takes a lot. It's like hard and it takes some recovery. So yeah, I mean, you could do it twice a week, but I would just do it once a week. That's enough. There's also there's a big trend towards plyometrics as well, which is also really good to do. I feel like it kind of falls under the umbrella of HIIT, but it's not the same, but it's more just that generating that agility and that speed and that quickness. And it's things like, hopping and, doing some like box jumps, broad jumps. You could do upper body plyometrics as well, like ball throws, ball slams, plyometric push-ups, this type of thing. That's good to do. So what I tend to do to make sure that the girls in my program are getting like that well balanced is I sometimes put the plyometric things in directly after the warm up, because it's actually good. It kind of warms up the fast twitch muscle fibers as well before we do the strength, and it doesn't fatigue you because you'd only just do like 5 minutes worth of it. So you can pop that in as well, because plyometrics are another thing that's, thanks to Dr. Stacey Sims, it's been popularized as well for especially the older women. So if you do that, you do one HIIT session, you do a couple zone 2, or even one zone 2, and you do your strength training, I would say that you're going to be pretty balanced overall.
Okay, cool. So just in summary, so zone 2, start with 20 minutes, build up from there. And if you want to add another one in, add another one, but you can still get benefits from one a week. And then
anything you can do is better than not doing it at all. I actually want to say as well, like there's big health benefits, which I don't see it often talked about in like the muscle building space, because everyone loves muscle building and training, but there's the studies show that the longevity benefits come more from the aerobic and the zone 2 than the strength training itself. Now, of course, strength training has amazing longevity benefits and everyone harps on about that a lot, but the cardio, especially aerobic training, has really, really big aerobic longevity benefits as well. And they say that it's like 5 times increases your lifespan 5 times versus strength training that's like 3 times. So it's crazy difference in the studies. And then the thing that it comes down to is that it's anti-inflammatory. So when you're doing that aerobic, you're actually in an anti-inflammatory state because it's very parasympathetic. So a lot of people tend to be stuck in this sympathetic go, go, go. And obviously strength training is quite sympathetic. It's quite, intense, and so is HIIT. So to bring that other side into the equation, and it helps with that anti-inflammatory. And a lot of these like chronic diseases are driven by inflammation in the body. So the studies are showing that it's actually very anti-inflammatory, which is why it helps with it helps you with anything that your body might struggle with that's an inflammatory disease, even things like autoimmune issues. It shows that it helps all of this as well. So I think it's important to touch on the longevity and the actual health benefits of it. It's very healthy. Because I know a lot of people are talking about the studies about the strength training, but then if you look at all the meta-analysis around exercise, it's very even. It's quite even. It's actually there's even more that are pro aerobic training. And I feel like sometimes we cherry pick. So unless you're literally going to sit there and you're going to take all the studies and you're going to be like, what's the most beneficial form of exercise? People do cherry pick, and they only want to post about their strength training ones, which I get it. I love it. And I think it's super important. And women are very under muscled, but there's also those ones too. And I look at them all, I look at all the research, and I'm like, okay, so it's really important as well to do aerobic training and to do some of that cardio for heart health and for, the longevity benefits. And I would love to talk to someone who thinks that cardio is pointless and has all the research on strength training. And I'd like to actually directly ask them, what about this research? Because this is really, really clear. And I'd like to have a conversation about that and see what they come up with, because unless they're cherry picking, you can't really ignore it. So I think there's that side as well, because we love to always cite our studies and everything.
Yeah. And I think because I just talk about where I've come from, and most women who join a program, they just don't know the right types. They don't understand the benefits, the zone.
Knowledge. Yeah.
They're smashing themselves in the zone 3, doing heaps of HIIT and, classes and shit. And it's like, well, like you say, what's your goal? Why are you doing something? Do you want to look better? Do you want to feel better? Okay, let's add some strength training in. Fucking track your fucking training, track your thing. Okay, let's add some beneficial cardio in. Let's not overdo it, because more isn't always better, right? Find that good balance of what you can fit into your life. And what you can enjoy. Because I think, I don't know, we always just go to extreme. Lots of people go, I'm very extremist, let's do everything. And just, I'm obviously much better now. I feel like maybe I can try the sprints. Just got to probably fit it in on the weekend. I'm sure I can fit 15 minutes in. Because, now I'm just doing 3 days a week and doing my recovery session, which really just fits in my schedule and life. And it's really good. And I really enjoy it. But, I did do pretty good in, track and field, and I can run. I'm sure. Give it a crack, and it's only 15 minutes. You've already converted me to doing the zone 2, so I'm sure I can do that as well, Libby. I'll report back. I'll see if I can add it in and then report back. Is there anything else you think that you want to add? That maybe you can send me some of the links to these studies, and I'll put them in the show notes people can read.
I'll send them.
Yeah, perfect. Anything else you want to add that we haven't discussed?
I think that's pretty good. It's just to be, if you want to be well-rounded, then do a good dose of the different things. Don't just ultra hyper fixate on one thing.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Libby. And as always, take a screenshot of the episode and share it on Instagram stories and tag me at KITTYBLOMFILD. You can also tag Libby. I'll put her Instagram handle below. And then each month I pick a winner and they get a tub of Saturée Premium Collagen valued at $79. I'll be back again next week.